While browsing YouTube recently, I came across a video by YouTuber Nathaniel Bandy titled, "I spent 12 years collecting every Nintendo 64 game." In this video, you see this man, Nathaniel Bandy, talk about his motives and journey to collect all 296 original Nintendo 64 games. It's a 30-minute conversation about ever-loving nostalgia and deep connections to a certain point in his life, while highlighting what the N64 console and games means to him. Talking about the games he played the most and the ones he enjoyed discovering years later. Truly a complete love letter to the N64 console, which is what you might expect from any individual who goes out of the way to collect every game released for it. Also of note, this was a 12-year journey for Nathaniel. Depending on how old you are watching this video right now, that could be half of your life spent collecting Nintendo 64 games. But given how hard it is to do this with prices these days, with the sheer amount of games you need to collect, and with most people not even caring about 75–80% of most of the games released for any given console, how alive is the idea of full set collecting, or is it basically dead now in 2023? And that's what we're going to talk about today. So get comfy, hit the like button, say thank you to every single Patreon as well as the YouTube members who help support the channel. I can't do it without you guys, and let's talk about full set collecting in 2023. So I actually wanted to talk about this topic as it is something that I do have a lot of personal experience with. I started actively collecting sometime in 2008–2009. This was me spending money on my own games from my own collection. And funny enough, one of the first goals I set for myself was to complete the entire set of North American N64 games. Compared to other Nintendo consoles, it was only 296 games, prices were relatively cheap, and N64 was pretty darn available. It was super feasible for me to do it even as a 16 to 18-year-old making almost minimum wage. Now, I never did complete the entire Nintendo 64 set, but I did get all the way up to about 250 cartridges, about 200 complete in-box games. I made a whole video on my thoughts and why I ended up quitting the full set, so I'm not going to get too sentimental on you guys right now. With full set collecting, it was also a goal of mine to get a complete NES set where I got all the way up to 600 and some cartridges. I do still have a complete in-box virtual set, of which there are 13 games released in North America. A very small set of games, but a game called Jack Bros does exist, which makes the set of 13 games still very expensive. When I was starting out, it really seemed like full set collecting is what every serious collector was doing. It was really championed amongst collector forums, or at least the ones I was participating in. Everyone's goal, be it short-term, long-term, was to complete the NES or the Super Nintendo or the N64 set, and some of the new people were already going for GameCube and Wii sets. That was crazy! And do know that even doing something like NES or Super Nintendo way back then was not that easy. Both of them have around 700 games in the set, and both of them are bogged down by super heavy titles. I'm sure you're familiar with the game Stadium Events. Even by the time I entered into the hobby, that game was already out of reach for most people. Most people actually did full NES set minus Stadium Events, and it was so popular that the forum Nintendo Age even had a badge icon for it. It's just kind of funny to remember that. But even with these expensive games, it was still feasible to put together these sets. People still made this their goal. It was something you could actually accomplish. If we talk about actual feasibility these days of putting together a full set, it gets a bit more bleak. So it's not that there's no one out there still looking for full sets or trying to collect full sets of games, but at least from my own experiences and what I see online, it's far, far less common for people to be going for the full set, and it's even more uncommon for people to be trying to actively complete these sets. It is still super common for people to collect games in a sense where, oh, someday I'd love to have every GameCube game, so if I see GameCube games or they're good price or something, I pick them up because my super long-term goal is to have every GameCube game. But they don't actively try to complete that. They're not going out of their way to buy expensive games or anything. It's just either going to happen or it's not going to happen, and that's awesome either way. And that's a great way to collect. But in almost every instance, if we're talking about full set collecting, unless you're actively making it a goal and you're actively pursuing it and working towards it, you probably just won't end up with every single game. Now, there is one exception to this that I do see online still, even now in 2023. Full set Wii U collecting is extremely popular. Many people have already completed that set, even though the Wii U isn't that old, and there are many people out there trying to complete it right now. It's super popular on YouTube, it's super popular on Reddit for people to be talking about Wii U. Wii U full set is alive and well. It genuinely feels like the same type of energy that the older consoles used to have 10 years ago. And I think the biggest reason for this is that it is still feasible to put together a full Wii U set. The set itself is around 166 games, someone can fact check me on that, and if we just take all of the price charting averages for CIB, it tallies up to somewhere around $5,000 to get the entire set of Wii U games. I even found this Reddit post from 2021 where someone says it took them about 5 months to put together the entire Wii U set, and it cost them about $5,000 when you factor in shipping and everything. Around $5,000 likely isn't a terrible estimate. Here I did actually calculate some of the cart-only sets as well as the CIB GameCube set, so you can see what they did cost in 2012 versus what they now cost in 2023, and you can also see the percent increases that did occur in the past 10 years. Putting it very simply, the vast majority of collectors are priced out of going for full sets. And even if someone can technically afford to do a full set of GameCube games, for instance, it's not exactly enticing to know you're gonna have to spend somewhere around $20,000 in order to do it, and like I said, most people generally don't care about 75–80% of the games released. Kind of interesting though, the $5,000 Wii U set actually isn't all that much cheaper than the $7,300 N64 set. Again, they're just price chart averages, so there is going to be room for error in those numbers, but even though the Wii U set isn't that much cheaper overall, it's actually almost half of the total games that it takes to do the N64 set. And this is another consideration I have to bring up if we're going to talk about the feasibility of doing a full set. How many games actually are there in that full set? N64 has always been a very popular full set to do because it's only 296 games. It was part of why I found it appealing as well. And now with the Wii U, it's only 170 games to get them all, which I understand sounds pretty enticing. Even doing the N64 set at 300 games, there is a lot of busy work involved with that. 300 games just aren't going to buy themselves, and if you look at Nathaniel Bandy again as an example, it took him 12 years to accumulate that. Yes, game stores and other retailers are going to help you out with some bulk titles. You can probably get the first 50 N64 games out of the way pretty quick without spending that much money, but then it's quickly going to turn into you buying them game by game, and even if you find yourself a bundle of games in 2023, it's unlikely it's going to have much of a discount attached to it, which obviously prices are what they are. They're higher than they were before, we all know that, but one of the best things about full set collecting back when I was getting into it, and even earlier than that, is that you could always knock off a lot of games if you were actively hunting. You could even find some games below fair market value, and I think that small glimmer of hope where if you go to a grad sale or you go to a thrift store where you could actually find one of the rarest games of the console and it's not going to be marked up and you won't have someone else beat you to it, I think all of us in a small way did believe that we wouldn't actually have to pay for the most expensive video games. So long as we kept at it, so long as we kept collecting, we were eventually just going to find it. These days, finding a Sculptor's Cut cartridge where you're not going to have to pay the exact market rate on the game, I mean, you might as well give up now if that's your hope, and I know that sounds discouraging, but kind of just the climate we're currently in. So when doing the full set in 2023, it really does just become you have a big list and a big checkbox, and one by one you're going to kind of buy them at market rate. You just have to budget, and it feels more like work or a chore or an obligation versus just going out and adventuring. And I actually think with Wii U, because it is a more modern console, it is a more recent release, there still is that wonder, there still is that ability to find some stuff in your random game store, people getting rid of it. Wii U still has some of that sense of adventure, Wii U still has some of that hunt. Because let's face it, we're all addicted to the hunt. We all love the hunt. The hunt is everything. And when you're only doing 170 games versus 300 or even 700, I think the GameCube's near 600, 170 just feels more achievable. It sounds more realistic. It feels like something you can actually do. I do think there's a lot of FOMO with Wii U 2 right now, some speculation there that if you don't collect the full Wii U set right now, you may never be able to. And I mean, if history has showed us anything with how the N64, the Super Nintendo, the GameCube sets have gone, they're probably correct. In that same line of thinking, I actually do still see people buying up Switch games as well, talking about doing a full Switch set, buying every Switch game as it releases. When we talk about full set collecting, who knows when the Switch is even going to stop printing physical games? Didn't the 3DS just have a physical release come out not long ago, Fragrant Story or something? So the Switch is likely going to be printing games for the next, I don't know, 2 to 5 years until they finally stop the physical library. And by that time, the physical full North American set for Nintendo Switch will very likely exceed 1,000 games. I know I've talked about Nintendo a lot in this video, but full set collecting for stuff like PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2 is extremely niche, and most of that is because both of those libraries have well over 1,000 games in them. When we get to that level of game, it just isn't really feasible to do the full set. And like I said, most people aren't going to care about like 90% of the stuff released when we're talking about over 1,000 games on the console. There are some people out there who have done it, and I absolutely tip my hat to those people, but I would never even start to try doing a full set of one of those consoles. And yes, Nintendo is far more popular in collector circles for the most part, but I just don't know if Nintendo Switch is going to have that level of feasibility. I don't know if any of these consoles outside of Wii U have really any popularity as far as full set collecting goes. And if it is the case that no one's interested in collecting these 360, PS3, PS4, PS5, all these different modern console full sets, then the idea or the concept of full set collecting is likely going to become very foreign for every modern collector. At some point, I figure I'll be sitting here and someone will be collecting for the new Nintendo console, whatever it is, and I'll mention the fact that I used to try and collect every single game that was released for a console. And that just won't be a thing to the point where they'll look at you and say, well, why the hell were you doing that? So for myself, I still absolutely love the concept of full set collecting, and I absolutely cheer on anyone that I hear is still going for a full set of any console games. With prices how they are these days, I have become a lot more selective about what I buy, and I am now focusing on the stuff that has a lot of nostalgia for me, or that I care about, or that I'm interested in, versus just having everything for the sake of having everything. Let me know what you think of full set collecting. Have you ever tried to collect a full set of games for any kind of console? If you are, I truly do wish you the best of luck with it, and I hope you do complete your collecting goals. Hit the like button before you go, subscribe for more game collecting content, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.